Here we go. We're live. Sportscast 18. The generation gap. Unrestrained and unrepentant. Here we go. Big weekend with college sports and the college football playoff. The big hammer, Michigan holds off Alabama in what was a very controversial game from a standpoint of Alabama getting in the first place and Michigan maintaining its eligibility to even play. But here we go. It was a big game. Alabama was not up to Michigan. Michigan won. I'm sure a lot of fans across the United States are thrilled that Alabama is out, but not everyone. Some people think Michigan just did not belong in the game. Charlie, what's up?
Well, every time the Big Ten has been in a bowl game for my entire life, I've rooted for the Big Ten team except for Michigan against Alabama because I still think Michigan's a bunch of cheaters. So I was pretty disappointed. That said, they're a damn good football team.
Nick, you're the youngest guy in this group. You've got a perspective probably the rest of us don't have. You're not jaded by a lot of old history when it comes to Michigan and the Big Ten. You've got some familiar with Alabama. It's probably not positive. Where are you coming down on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want either team to win, to be honest with you. I don't really know where I stand on the Michigan thing. It's definitely not fully positive. So leave it at that. And then I didn't feel great about Alabama being in the playoffs to begin with. So one hand, I'm glad that Alabama wasn't vindicated as a potentially deserving playoff team. On the other hand, I don't feel great about Michigan going into the championship looking like the favorite.
And Benny, the Big 12, the Longhorns got wrestled to the ground by the Huskies. How does that make you feel?
Don't feel much. I'm not really. I think for several years now, I have not really thought of the Big 12 as being a powerhouse football conference. So if the Big 12 does much of anything now, that's great. But if it's not Kansas, which it could still be a while before Kansas, if they ever do compete in college football playoffs, then that's okay. It's whatever. I think at this point with having like Michigan versus Alabama in the playoffs, and I think it's just kind of showing it's kind of the natural life cycle of college football right now, where it kind of eats itself up with controversy and problems with NIL and the transfer portal and players no longer playing in games. It just seems like a perfect storm of issues they've caused for themselves. So having two very unfavorable teams play against each other that no one really likes is just not surprising. And we'll just see what happens from here.
And Bobby, Lance Leipold, Kansas, but Benny was very dismissive of Kansas and their prospects, and probably for the whole Big 12 and what it's all about. Bobby, you got a perspective you can share?
I mean, if Washington can make the playoff, I think any big name, any Power 5 school could. It's not like Washington has some great football history. They were, they've been a good team for a few years, but this is, certainly a surprise that they made it to the Final Four and now the title game. I will say, both my picks were right. I got Washington against Michigan in the final, so that's looking pretty good for me, which is really all that matters. So I just need Washington to finish off Michigan in the final, and I'll be in good shape. But they were both entertaining games, which was good. They ended way the hell too late. I mean, it was ridiculous. The last game was over at like midnight. But they were good games, so I was happy about that.
Well, I think Michigan's the best team in college football. I think
Washington has a better quarterback, though. Amir Penix is really good. He's been underrated all season. He could have won the Heisman.
Well, he's pretty good, but he hasn't always placed the stiffest competition. I think if he gets up against a team like Michigan, he's got some problems. There's some real athletes chasing him around.
Yeah, they got a good defense.
Laying some hits on him.
But I haven't seen a quarterback in college football with a better arm than Penix this year in the accuracy. I mean, the fact, I think if he wasn't at Washington, he would have won the Heisman. It's just because nobody sees the West Coast teams. But he looked really impressive.
Huh. You think he's better than Jaden Daniels?
He's certainly been more successful, certainly been winning more. Obviously, Washington's got a better team than LSU, certainly this year. But if at this point, I think Penix will, very well could get drafted ahead of him. It wouldn't surprise me at all, especially if they win the title.
Well, yeah.
I think his stock is going up, way up.
Yeah, winning cures a lot of ills, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody beating Michigan. This is their year. It's ugly. I think their coach is going to head out the door within a couple of days after they win the national championship. And it's going to be kind of sour for everybody. By the same token, they are the team to beat. Charlie, you think Washington's got a chance?
I think they have a chance if Michigan turns it over. Michigan's defense is probably so much better than anything Washington has faced all year. That despite, a great quarterback can will a team to victory, but I don't know. I just don't think they've seen a defensive powerhouse like Michigan. But things happen, if they get some early turnovers, get the momentum going.
If Michigan fumbles a couple punts.
Absolutely. And then a team can get tight, right? So the momentum starts going against Michigan. I think Washington's got a chance, but I think absent some unusual big plays in Washington's favor, I think it's Michigan's victory.
Think there's any chance that Michigan thinks they already have this thing won? They beat Alabama and they maybe aren't up for the game. They kind of sleepwalk in the first quarter of that championship game.
I don't know. This looks like a pretty focused team. They've gone through a lot this year. I don't think Harbaugh is going to let them get distracted or complacent.
You think he's the best coach in college football?
If you set aside the cheating, he might be.
I think
it comes down to special teams. I'm worried about Michigan. Their special teams looked pretty horrendous in that game. It was from the punt returns to the extra point field goals. I mean, it was just circus.
I would think they'll put a lot of emphasis on that this week, though, in terms of getting that squared away. I mean, that was the only way they were going to lose is by making mistakes. I get kind of to Charlie's point. The only way that Washington can really make a hard push here is if Michigan kind of hands it over to them. Now, Washington get hot in the beginning of the game.
How long have you been tracking our car's value with Carter?
Doing some research on Oregon's defense. I think you guys
like
might
you're
be
tracking car values to me, Nick.
Well, it's got that. I guess I'll make the point now, but I think you guys might be discounting Washington beating Oregon twice this year. If we're talking about them have not even played anybody or played any good defenses, Oregon's legit. I think they were picked to beat Washington both times, and didn't. They are for sure there with Ohio State, better than Penn State. And this is a team that Washington's beat twice.
Huh.
So
Do you think that that's the resume right there, beating Oregon twice? Well,
if we think Michigan is, some dominating squad, I think it's I think it's fair to discount Washington's schedule.
I think you look at Washington's schedule, it's kind of interesting. They have a perfect record.
Right.
But it's interesting. They had a hell of a lot of close games.
They did.
And you could argue that means they played a lot of bad teams and they barely beat them. But by the same token, they were a lot of close games and they won them all.
Yeah, and then they beat Texas, who beat Alabama, by 10 at their place. So there's no evidence that Washington isn't in the same league as Michigan here.
So who are you picking to win, Nick?
I'm gonna pick Michigan, but I'm not all gung ho about it like you guys are. I think this is legit flag. And I
There's
do
a
think it's
chance.
our quarterback.
There's a chance, maybe small, but Washington's got a chance. Yeah, it's hard to see Washington rolling into that game and just steamrolling. We're steamrolling Michigan. I could see Michigan potentially blowing out Washington, but my guess there's so much emotion in these games that there's always kind of wild swings. You know, Michigan, to your point, is kind of imperfect the way they play. You know, they have a lot of bobbles. They have some turnovers, and that can swing momentum in a momentum-driven game. But it's hard to see something like Washington hanging with Michigan for 60 minutes.
Well, just to be contrary, if we put Michigan under the same magnifying glass that we've been examining Washington through, I mean, how many really good teams did Michigan play this year? Ohio State? Well, Ohio State didn't look so great in the bowls. And Alabama? Well, Alabama nearly lost 2 games or even 3. You know, their victory against Auburn was one of the luckiest things I've ever seen. So, you know, there's I don't know if Michigan's as perfect as we think they are.
I think there have been better teams than Michigan in the last 10 years. Many teams are better. I think that this year with a parity in college football, Michigan's a hot team. They're on the roll. They're physical. They're athletic, and I guess to Charlie's point, they're focused. So I'd have a hard time betting against them. But you know, it is college football, and that's why it's so much fun because anything can happen, right?
Yeah.
Anything can happen. I mean, I really thought the best team in college football was Georgia. I think Georgia probably should have been in the Final Four in the playoff, but they lost one game, and they lost one game too many, so they were no longer deserving, and they weren't considered among the top 4, which is very strange to me. But that's the way it works.
That's how it worked out this year.
Good sign for the expansion for next year, though. I think we definitely had more than 4 teams this year that were legit and had a shot to be a title contender. So next year could be fun.
Yeah, I agree. That's going to be totally different next year. And of course, it's interesting. Both Washington and Michigan are Big Ten teams now.
Yeah. Yep. So Big Ten is looking good.
So the Big Ten is, going to have a little chip on its shoulder. Okay, here we go. But obviously, the SEC will be targeting Big Ten teams. So it will be interesting next year. It's college football's crazy. You know, it's kind of what Benny was talking about. What goes on the transfer portal, NIL, it really shakes things up. I don't think those things are really good for the game from a fan standpoint, but I guess from a parity standpoint, and from the standpoint that anything can happen on any given Saturday, it sure makes it more interesting.
I think we're going to learn pretty fast whether you can buy a great college team, because it appears there are some schools that are out there attempting to do just that, throwing serious amounts of money at the transfer portal. So,
well, you look at the kid going to Nebraska, Dylan Raiola. I mean, hey, he had Ohio State in his pocket, and then he had Georgia in his pocket, but then he opted out. So you're right. Anything can happen.
Bobby, I'm curious, you know, one thing I recall when we did like some of the predictions before the college football season got going, I know that you were pretty hopeful about Minnesota making a decent run. In fact, you had them in the Big Ten championship, I believe.
Yeah, well, that's because the Big Ten West was so pathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, Iowa's not any good either. They just lost less. like everybody in the Big Ten West was bad. So Minnesota had as good a chance as anybody. We just didn't execute and had some injuries, and our quarterback wasn't very good. So.
But I guess then, you know, one thing I wonder about is, you know, what is the future of PJ Fleck at Minnesota? Because obviously for me, he's like the most interesting coach in college football because he's pretty wild. And he has all these crazy sayings that are really funny and entertaining to watch. You know, and like him jumping into like his players in the locker room to like do crowd surfing and stuff after winning games. You don't see that much in college football. So I'm curious, what is his future, do you think, at Minnesota? And what needs to happen next season for him to stick around for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I mean, his job is stable right now. But if he has another season like this next year, then things would get interesting. Because this year was obviously disappointing. And there have been a couple seasons like this where we underachieved, essentially. So he's got to change the way he does some things. And we're starting to see some signs of that. Hopefully, we actually dipped into the transfer portal for a quarterback finally. We've always developed our own quarterbacks. We haven't done any transfer quarterbacks at all since he's been there, really. So we're bringing in a pretty talented guy out of New Hampshire. So hopefully that works out. We actually brought in 2 transfer quarterbacks. We brought in one from Fresno State as well. So that, and I think changing some of the mindset of not being so conservative all the time. So there are some things like that I think really need to shift, and we'll see if he adapts to the current college football climate, and if he doesn't, he's not going to stick around much longer. But he's had some of the better seasons that Minnesota's had in the last 30, 40 years. So overall, he's, I think, still mostly elevated the program, but we're going to have to keep ascending here.
How do you think Minnesota will fare over the long term in the NIL transfer portal world? I mean, my impression, I just don't have the sense that they've got the enthusiastic football fan base that's going to allow them to succeed at the top tier.
Yeah, well, we did not get off to a very good start. Last year, and like the first basically 2 years of NIL, we were exposed and we lost some players. But this season, especially towards the end of the season, I think it has started to turn around a little bit. We actually have like 3 of our best players all announced they're coming back next season and specifically called out NIL. And so the collective Dinkytown athletes that have been formed for Minnesota seems to be gaining some momentum. It's really just mostly been a grassroots thing where they, it's kind of subscription based. They bring, let fans kind of buy in at a certain level and kind of accumulate that way. And a lot of local Minnesota businesses have kind of gotten involved as well now. So yeah, there's some momentum being generated there. I don't think we're ever going to be at the level of the top tier teams, but I think we can get enough to at least survive. So we'll see how it goes, but it was encouraging that we didn't lose some players this year, which I was fearful we would.
So then you want to play the Georgia-Florida State game?
That was pretty ugly, but it wasn't surprising. I mean, Florida State had a lot of guys that just opted out. So.
And they had a chance to make a kind of a cool statement had they won that game.
And they sure didn't.
In fact, they won, I think, like 23 guys and they're 2 deep.
Yeah, it was awful.
I mean, it's nice to say that, but then you got all the kids and their agents and everybody talking in their ear to just that it's pointless. So it was not surprising to me at all. Which and this is why it's good the playoff is expanding, because there are only 2 games that were interesting in the bowls. Every other bowl game, for the most part, has not been interesting at all, because it's either a blowout or you got B and C teams playing each other. So.
Well, you start to wonder now for Florida State if they aren't on the brink of some kind of implosion, because not only do they have all these players leaving, but there was a very bitter, ongoing bitter squabble with the ACC now. A lot of Florida State folks feel like the ACC is either just not good for them or made no effort to get them into the Final Four. Things look ugly. And that last game sure didn't help any.
So I think it'll be interesting next year when you've got the 12-team playoff. Will you see many guys opt out? Many guys who are among those 12 teams. Will some of them opt out? I mean, if they're like team 10, 11, or 12, and they really don't feel like they've got a chance, might they
That
decide?
would be pretty surprising. I mean, anything's possible. I mean,
Yeah.
backup. I mean, Texas's backup quarterback opted out. Yeah, I mean, that would be a sign of a real problem in college football if you see players from playoff teams on.
Well, we'll see if this proposal from the president of the NCAA gets any traction. You know, it didn't get a lot of discussion, but a couple of weeks ago, he put out this idea that basically your big time schools would elect to make their players employees, and that the entry money to be part of this elite group was estimated to be $30 million a year, so that to guarantee that you would have enough athletes ready to go. It was quite an unusual idea, but it would turn the athletes into employees and thereby enable the NCAA to get some control over all this again.
Were there some issues with that they weren't sure how to enforce academic standards?
They got a problem now with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I know they do, but it's like it was really more difficult to make a kid scholastically ineligible. And I know that was some lawyers had postured that. I'm not really sure the total logic behind that, but to me, that's just one more nail in the coffin of college sports. But
well, with kids
crazy.
Changing schools all the time, there's already total chaos there, because a kid who goes to 2 or 3 or 4 schools and is dragging all those credits along behind is going to keep enrolling in new programs with different requirements, and not all those transfer credits may be transferable. There is nothing. Now maybe the group could work on this internally, but there is nothing that requires any school to accept any transfer credits from any other school. So there's plenty of opportunity for this to get really complicated, and they might even have to rethink, what constitutes enrollment for eligibility purposes. Maybe taking 6 credits is good enough. Who knows where this will go?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, because how many students that are going to be transferring are they even going to graduate in the first place? I mean, or even looking to graduate? Because I feel like if you're really a stud athlete, those are people that are typically be able to transfer because they're actually being recruited to go to other schools. I mean, most of these guys that have NFL on their mind are not thinking about staying 4 years in college, graduating. So the transfer credit situation, I think, is kind of funny, because it's mostly just, pretending that you're actually taking these credits to graduate when you're really not planning on it, if you can.
Yeah, and I think like Georgia's quarterback, or maybe it was a previous quarterback or something, but I saw that he played like 5 or 6 years and never graduated. Just like ridiculous. At least with Minnesota, when they have a guy stick around for 6 or 7 years, at least he has graduated and is working on a master's degree by the time he's done. Like Minnesota doesn't have guys just sticking around for 7 years and not graduating.
No, but
that's why we got into a bowl game, because APR was so good.
Yeah, but Minnesota's a funny school because, one, they don't have guys who can actually transfer anywhere else. It's rarity when they can.
I mean, Bucky Irving, a superstar running back from Oregon, was with Minnesota a couple years.
So what do you think happened there? Why did he leave?
that was NIL. That was 2 years ago. That's when our NIL was a complete joke. Now our superstar running back Darius Taylor, who just ran for 200 yards in the bowl game, is returning.
He's going to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Huh. He must figure he can't start at other schools.
He was the leading rusher in the Big Ten when he got hurt, so I think he could.
Really? Okay, well, that's impressive. That's impressive.
So do you think Minnesota finishes in the top 15 in the Big Ten next year?
I would hope we're in the top 15. Yeah.
Well, that means they got to beat 3 other teams.
Yeah, that's tough. It's hard to figure out which 3 it would be.
Yeah.
What's the vibe in Madison right now? I mean, how's Wisconsin doing on the NIL front? And what's the thinking in Madison? What do they feel their prognosis is?
You know, they're a little quieter about what goes on with NIL. I've got a feeling it's not huge dollars, or we get all kinds of interesting guys showing up through the transfer portal. I think that we do seem to be having more of the, I'm going to say, the ingredients for a pretty good team, or the possibility of having one. That said, it's pretty hard to know if you can really measure up to what the standard is going to be at, say, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, maybe Oregon, in terms of what they've got for NIL and what they've got from sort of reputation standpoints. It's kind of hard to compete with those schools, but I think Wisconsin, be interesting. They could have a better team next year and have a crummier record. And I know 7-6 is nothing to rave about, but that is 22 seasons in a row with 21 seasons in a row with a winning record. And that's the longest in college football. So there is a strong standard to try to hold there.
How many non-conference games will the Big Ten play next year? Will they keep it at 3?
I believe it's 9-3.
9-3. Okay.
Yeah,
they'll need those
non-conference. Wisconsin, they got a couple of doormats, but they also have Alabama for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
And then after Alabama, they play Notre Dame. So with Wisconsin's, they've been loading up with pretty good teams. I believe they were going to play Washington a couple times, and now that Washington's coming in the conference, obviously that kind of gets erased. But it's been Wisconsin's thought to this point. You had to play a pretty strong schedule in order to get into the playoff. Now with expanded to 12 teams, maybe you look at those 3 non-conference games a little differently. I don't know.
Yeah, I suspect they will. Yeah.
But do I think Wisconsin can hold up to an Alabama team? No, probably not. But you never know.
John, you mentioned this earlier. Is Jim Harbaugh presumed to be heading out?
He's hired an agent.
Uh-huh.
And this agent supposedly has a lot of connections with NFL teams.
Yeah.
Supposedly off the record that the Chargers and the Bears are aggressively going after him, sort of in the background here. But Michigan's offered him a $150 million contract to stay, and he could have signed that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of chatter as to Harbaugh moving on. Is that driven by his desire to go to the NFL? Is that driven by a scandal that's about to pop, or I'm going to say more restrictions placed on the Michigan program? I don't know. But we'll be very interested to see the next week, 10 days, if he's still at Michigan.
Yeah. It's strange timing. Seeming like they're kind of hitting their apex program with him.
Yeah. This is the last Sunday coming up for the regular season for the NFL. So there'll be a lot of coaching changes made there. College football's wrapped up. So things usually happen pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think maybe he should consider going to the Jets because I think we could use a new head coach.
The Jets.
Hey, you want to be that big market, New York City? Can't do worse than that. Either that, or maybe Bill Belichick will leave the Patriots and come to the Jets.
Wow.
I would be surprised. You never know. He started his career with the Jets, I think, and I think the Patriots are kind of getting tired of him. So,
Uh-huh.
but I think the Jets will probably keep Robert Saleh for a little bit longer. But yeah, I've not been impressed with the Jets coaching staff.
Right. I guess if Harbaugh and Aaron Rodgers could work together, they're actually kind of alike.
Yeah.
But sometimes guys who are that similar, with egos that big, actually have trouble staying in the same room together very long. So
Maybe Rodgers could be a player coach.
I think he already is.
Oh God, he already is like the assistant head coach. Yeah, that's right. That's pretty ridiculous. Yeah, my God. Yeah, I'm sure that's an interesting locker room to be in general. So
Yeah. So, Charlie, what do you think of Aaron Rodgers these days?
I liked him a lot until like 2 years ago. They started getting kind of weird. He just got weirder in the last day. You probably saw that.
Yeah, I mean, what's that about?
I don't know. Apparently he's got some bug up his rear end about Jimmy Kimmel, and why he then had mixed that up with Epstein. It's beyond me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean,
yeah,
that is just odd.
Yeah, and that might be a bridge too far. I think some of the Jets fans, they might start to see what he's starting to wear out his welcome in Wisconsin, and it might start happening in New York too.
I can see that, not only the New York media, but the New York fans will get on Rodgers real fast if he doesn't produce next year.
Yep.
Because man, the guy is heartless. And man, you talk about self-absorbed. Holy cow.
Yeah.
So we'll see where that goes.
I don't feel it's always that way. I felt like he was a consummate professional for a good part of his career. I thought he fit into the state of Wisconsin and Green Bay Packer culture well for a long time.
Yeah.
And just the last few years, it changed pretty dramatically.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, he's kind of aging like Brett Favre did, ironically. Brett Favre near the end of his career kind of became a little bit kookier. And then he got in trouble for like being part of some fraudulent thing or something he got mixed up with.
He did.
And, he was kind of an oddball character a little bit as well. And then, had a cameo with the Jets at the end of his career. So, there's a few coincidences there.
Yeah, there's no question. Brett's an interesting character. But I think sometimes he's more forgivable because he just wasn't that bright to begin with, or not perceived to be that bright. Where Aaron Rodgers, likes to let you know that he's an intellectual. So we'll see how this plays out. Aaron Rodgers is probably I think he's the best quarterback over a 10-year period in the NFL. I really do. Even though he didn't win all those games, he was incredible to watch. He was so accurate, so tough. But he's not the kind of guy I really admire or want to hang out with.
Well, one little thing here I want to bring up. I know we've kind of departed college football a little bit, but I did sort of calculate how successful we all were when it came to our conference championship picks. Needless to say, some of us did better than others, and in some ways actually a lot better. It's kind of embarrassing to see how some people fared, but that's life. Charlie, you were not part of this because I think I don't know what you were doing. So you just failed to show up, and therefore you get no points as a result, 0. So you failed the test. Probably how it worked out when you were in college too. You just didn't show up to class, and that's what happens. So anyway, for those of us who did show up, starting off, sitting with Charlie in last place, we have me and Bobby both got 0. None of us had any successful picks.
Talking about college football conference winners?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happened. So Surprisingly for me, I thought I really had a pretty good gauge of what was going to happen, and I'm shocked. But sometimes there's like these kind of, like an earthquake, you can't predict it, and I think that's what happened here with my picks. For example, Kansas did not beat Kansas State in the Big 12 championship. Beyond me, how that did not happen. Unfortunately, it didn't. So I guess some people, even the people that are the most knowledgeable people in this group about college football, sometimes just don't get the picks right, which just shows how unpredictable it can be. Nick, you got 1 point, so congratulations there. Nick had I think you got Alabama. Yeah, so 1 point for Nick.
Roll Tide.
Dad, you got Michigan, so you got 1 point, but taking home the title of this group was actually John, who had 3 out of 5 correct. So
Wow.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I think if you understand how the college game works, momentum works, how tradition comes into play, NIL, the transfer portal, I think you can understand pretty well where this is all going. So I very humbly acknowledge that I wouldn't. I think you guys keep it up, keep digging, keep evaluating the teams and what goes on, and one day you guys can be saying, hey, I at least got a shot at second. So
well, I'm 2 for 2 in the playoff picks, so.
John, I mean, you're now no longer in last place out of like all-time predictions, so that's the good news. You're still second to last, so don't get too over the top of there.
It's not where you've been; it's where you're going.
Yeah, well, you got a long way to
like
go.
The trend line here a lot. I like the trend line. Who's in last place, by the way?
That would be me for now.
Well, I guess it doesn't surprise me that I stepped over you, but
yeah, I was
next?
ahead of you by 1 point.
Who do I have to pick off next? This is a long run.
I think I'll have to sort of calculate a few more, but based on what I've calculated so far, I think you've just passed Nick as well. So now Bobby's ahead of you by 2 points. So you're now in the middle of the pack in the standings.
Yep, and on the rise. I like that.
Yeah, that was a big 3 points for you. So
yep.
Oh my gosh. Well, what are you guys thinking about some of the news going on with Detroit Pistons finally won a game? That's important. They don't have to burn their stadium to the ground now. So
were they 2 games off the record? It's too bad.
It's hard to believe in this day and age. With free agency and all the money out there and all the talent in the NBA, that one team can be so inferior that can lose 28, 29 games in a row. And that is unbelievable in this day and age. I can see that, many years ago when, teams, the money was much different and they had a hard time evaluating talent. But in this day and age, that just seems unbelievable.
There's so much variability too. Pretty much every team can shoot threes to some extent. The Pistons, obviously worse. I think they're probably worse than the league. But that adds so much variability to the games. And all these teams are, to some extent, super talented. I'd be shocked if they didn't, resume a more normal level of bad in the NBA.
Yeah, I agree. There's like a handful of teams in the NBA that just will spend money at any cost to get a championship team. And some of those great players all want to be together because they want to win a title, they want to win a ring. But after that, it seems like you've probably got, 16, 20 teams that should be on pretty much the same level.
Mm-hmm.
I think the funniest part was just seeing like the post-game interviews with the Pistons players during that streak where they're like, we're bad, but we're not this bad. I was like, it's reached that point. That's pretty great. So
Yeah.
Well, they almost got the
pretty
Celtics
amazing.
in OT, didn't they, Ben?
they did. Yeah. They almost beat the
Yeah.
Celtics, which I'm sure they are pumped up to play the Celtics. Like, okay,
Yeah.
let's at least beat the Celtics to bring us because that will at least have some redemption for us, but didn't happen. So
Hey, Benny, I got to ask you something. I guess, switching gears here a little bit, but I'm a little bit perplexed with the Chiefs. Sometimes they look pretty damn average. And Bobby, I know you're a big Chiefs fan. What gives there? I mean, is the magic sort of out of Kansas City? Are they getting old, or what's going on? You can't blame it all on Travis Kelce's girlfriend. So I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah, it hasn't been a real impressive season. But nobody's going to want to play us in the playoffs. I know that. We absolutely can still win it all. Yeah, I mean, I think it's partly the syndrome of a great team kind of getting bored during the regular season to an extent, but also there's been some regression. The wide receiver play has not been very good. But the defense has been mostly excellent, which is what's going to give us a chance. So if our offense can be functional, and if Mahomes can do his thing, we can beat anybody anytime. So yeah, we're certainly not the favorite, and I don't think we're the favorite at this point. But I still think we have about as good a shot as anyone.
So I want to interject here because I recall at the very beginning of the season, I had made an astute observation about the Chiefs' offense, which Bobby flat out rejected as preposterous, but I think has kind of become pretty obviously true. And I said that the Chiefs' wide receiving core is not very good. And Bobby was talking about how they're talented. These guys were great in the playoffs and, had maybe a good catch or two. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs' wide receiving core, this is what happens when you lose Tyreek Hill and you don't spend any money to try to replace
and release him.
Even Schuster was gone. Who was decent, but he was never he had some really good years, I think, with the Steelers, but even then was not consistent. But I mean, the receiving core they came in with the playoffs with a superstar quarterback is embarrassing. I think they really should have had at least one guy that's a clear number one that's had proof that he can put up 1,000-yard seasons. I mean, yes, Travis Kelce's great, but if he's the only guy you're throwing to, I mean, it's just Travis Kelce and then a bunch of randos, totally random people.
Well, Rashee Rice has had a really good rookie season.
He's improved, but no one knew how good he was going to be.
Right. But he's gotten better over the course of the year, and I think he's one of the best rookie receivers in the league at this point. So we have him. After him, yeah, there's a pretty significant drop-off. We've had major regressions. I mean, Sky Moore was a fairly high draft pick, first round or late first round or second round, and he is just fallen off the face of the earth. Certainly didn't have a big year last year necessarily, but had a big playoffs and Super Bowl, so there was hope that there would be some momentum there. That has not happened. Kadarius Toney has become a shell of his former self. Not that he was ever a superstar, but he's been real talent. He's got a lot of talent, and he showed it in some big games last year, but he's been just a disaster this season. And then MVS has not been very good. Yeah, I mean, it's been disappointing. There's no question about it. It's just something they're gonna have to address in the offseason, clearly.
I mean, especially for a team that now wins 2 Super Bowls together with that main core. It just seems like what a dumb thing to do just to assume, and also like how kind of overconfident you could be that you could just think that, all we need is Kelce and Mahomes and the rest of the guys will just figure it out. It's just like, how many teams, like take a New York Jets, for example, what they'd kill to have an opportunity to have even remotely the talent the Chiefs have on their team. And, to not just, I don't know, maybe it's a salary cap problem to a certain extent, but to not get a number one receiver or just someone who's clearly competent and can put up solid numbers. And obviously, even if you have just a pretty good receiver instead of like a superstar, having Mahomes and Kelsey on there will make that guy perform much better anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Hopefully Rashee Rice becomes that guy. It's looking promising, but yeah, we're going to have to do more. Clearly what we did this offseason did not work.
So does anybody dispute at this point that Baltimore appears to be the favorite?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely the favorite.
I mean, who else you have to beat? I mean,
you know, Lamar hasn't done it in the playoffs yet. That's the only big question.
That's the only thing. They got a little like Michigan. They got history hanging over their heads. When are they going to get over the top? But their resume is ridiculous. I mean, beating top teams around the NFL by 20, 30 points. It's been striking. Lamar Jackson seems finally to have figured out the best way to attack things. He's running less. He's rolling out a lot. He's buying time. He's got better connections with his receivers. And speaking of receiving cores, Baltimore really did upgrade its receiving core, and acquiring Odell Beckham and some other talent, drafting receivers high as well. And of course, their defense has been formidable too.
But will they? My question though is, because I feel like I see this a lot, especially guys who have a history of being running quarterbacks. When they get in the playoffs, they might start to go back to their old habits because they're feeling, okay, it's playoffs, I got to risk everything. And then boom, he gets hurt during the playoffs. I just feel like, will he be disciplined enough to not lose his cool and start making these sort of desperate plays that could get him hurt? Because if he gets hurt in the playoffs, Ravens are toast.
Well, yeah, but I think what he's shown this year consistently now through 16 games is that he's kind of figured out when he should go and when he shouldn't. His patience and maturity have grown quite a bit, and he's got so much help around him that I think he realizes that everything doesn't hang on what he does.
Well, hope so. I think the 49ers will be the kind of the other interesting team to watch, though Purdy has struggled a little bit more as of late.
Well, Purdy's a mystery. He's a shooting star, and it's been an amazing season. Nobody can quite figure this out. Obviously, the scouts did not rate him that high. His arm can't be that great, or he wouldn't have been the last man taken in the entire draft. If you've got a cannon arm, somebody's going to pick you higher than that. But he's been awfully effective, and the 49ers are full of talent. I personally thought they were probably going to beat Baltimore, and I was floored when Baltimore dismantled them. So that could change in a rematch, but you kind of have to go with the evidence from game one to project game two.
Yeah, it's kind of a big difference between Baltimore and the 49ers is that Brock Purdy is a great game manager, but I could see in the draft there were probably 20 other guys who look just like him. But of course, they didn't have quite the on-field presence that Purdy has. He can run an NFL team and run it very, very efficiently. But yeah, like Jackson can really elevate his team because he's got so much ability. That said, Jackson takes a big hit or he panics a little bit. He's only 1-3 in playoff games.
Yeah, it's the history that makes one wonder. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there's the Chiefs we already talked about. Maybe they'll be electrified when the playoffs start. We'll see.
I'd be surprised if they didn't play better, but they've had a lot of games they've looked kind of mediocre this year. And we're the last half dozen games they've been less than special.
So what's the next team? What team do you think anybody would be the fourth team talking Super Bowl here? After those are the three obvious teams.
You talking about AFC or NFL, the whole NFL or AFC?
Yeah, whole NFL. I mean, who else? Who's a threat?
You get to look at the Eagles or the Cowboys getting hot. Every time you think the Cowboys are ready to take the next step, though, they kind of take a half a step back.
Yeah.
You know, the Eagles look like the team, but they've been kind of off their game a little bit here for
Yeah.
the last 5 weeks or so too. But seem like the Eagles have a shot at getting back to it again. That's an awfully good football team. My heart would be with the Lions. Christ, I'd love to see those guys. Keep going.
Definitely a fresh face.
You got to get a franchise that's been so bad for so long. You've got a quarterback that was, basically shown the door. By the Rams. So it'd be nice to see the Lions make a run here. That'd be cool.
Yeah, speaking of the Rams, they're playing well. It's a squad that did it just a couple years ago. I think they, should be considered just as, you go San Francisco, like the clear favorite in the NFC. After that, between the Lions, Cowboys, Eagles, and the Rams, I don't know if I see a clear team that's the best out of those four. I think the Rams have just as good a shot as any of these other ones.
Yeah, I think the NFC is wide open. I mean, I could see the Packers making them. They definitely caused the Chiefs some problems. I think almost anybody in the NFC could that's in the playoff race could make it, because Eagles and Niners have not been very impressive. So anything can happen there. And the AFC, I think the Bills could certainly be dangerous. I think the Browns could be dangerous because Flacco's playing so.
Joe Flacco wins a Super Bowl for the Browns.
Wouldn't that be something?
I tell you, it's wild to see Flacco doing so well,
Yeah.
and Baker Mayfield doing so well right now.
Yeah.
You're talking about a couple guys whose careers were over.
2 reclamation projects.
Absolutely, and no one expected that.
No.
I mean,
and
yeah.
looking at Flacco, his arm is still a cannon. I mean, he can deliver that ball anywhere in the field. It's amazing. And he's playing with enthusiasm and confidence right now. Somehow, this has all come together.
All that time away from the NFL has kind of cleansed his mind.
Yeah,
Go out there and
he had
just
to
have
play
fun because
he had to play for the Jets a little
low,
bit.
Well, people forget that he was, former Super Bowl MVP. So, I mean,
yeah, that's right.
It's the guy can play if he's on a competent team. I mean, but if you're on the Jets, you're basically screwed at quarterback. So you're going to get hit every play, and your coaching staff has no idea what they're doing. And the ownership will just constantly just rinse and repeat this same situation every single season. So it's pretty insane. I'm sure his time with the Jets would be predictable for anyone in his shoes, just because that team is pretty bad. So good luck to Aaron Rodgers the next season.
So in other words, the Jets aren't about to turn the corner next year.
I mean, if you get an offensive line, the Jets, that would be better. There's talent on the team, but the core pieces, like having a competent offensive line, that you're not going to get crushed every play at quarterback. I mean, I the fact that Aaron Rodgers lasted one play, or 1 or 2 plays, was it? Pretty much sums up the offensive line for the season, because Zach Wilson was getting killed every time he touched the football, and every other random person they threw in at quarterback. Not that those quarterbacks were good either, but it's especially hard, when you have no one protecting you. So.
So do you think the Jets defense is sound?
It's
or they
good
still
enough.
Kind of leaky too.
It's good enough. I mean, I think over time they started to break down just because they got tired of basically playing all the time. When you have no offense, essentially, and you're constantly relying on your defense, I think a defense just starts to give up after a while because it just becomes hopeless. I think there's tons of talent on the defense. The Jets defense, probably with a competent offense, would be one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. But, when you're constantly going in there to play defense, knowing that, well, if we go give up any points, we're basically screwed. It's not really a great mentality to work with. So, the Jets, Yeah, I mean, they're just gonna need an offensive line and probably a better coaching staff, honestly. But I don't know. We'll see what Aaron Rodgers can do if it lasts more than a few plays next year. So
So if a healthy Aaron Rodgers comes on board next year, how many games does he last before he takes a hit that knocks him out? Or how many games does he play? And are the Jets a 500 or a better team?
well, if the Jets make some, solid signings on the offensive line, I think the Jets will probably be like they could be like a 10-6 team or something like that. If they keep the offensive line as is, I think he'll probably get hurt about halfway through the season, and the Jets will finish, probably like, I don't know, 7-10 or something like that. So, but Aaron Rodgers is fine if you could protect him. If you could protect him, he could be pretty good. I don't know what it's gonna be like though, playing without a year off at his age is significant. So I don't know how comfortable he's gonna be. So having a
coming off a major injury.
Yeah, so having a really good offensive line is gonna be incredibly important. But that's why, I mean, honestly, despite the fact that people can make the excuse for the Jets coaching staff that, oh, well, Aaron Rodgers got hurt. I mean, the fact that the team wasn't even really contending for the playoffs for pretty much most of the year, no serious Jets fan thought the Jets were really going to make the playoffs without Aaron Rodgers. So, I just, yeah, part of this is probably just kind of politics of the locker room with Aaron Rodgers. You don't want to get rid of the coaching staff that he likes, but if I could have it any way, I'd get rid of the coaching staff he likes. So, because those guys, I don't know how Zach Wilson would have turned out with another team. Maybe he would have been respectable, but they also drafted him. So that staff chose him, and he was terrible. And every person they've tried to plug in has not been good. And so you have to go out and get a 40-year-old, Hall of Famer to come and try to fill the void for a year or two. And then he gets hurt on the first few plays because your offensive line is terrible. And you guys have been drafting offensive line for like the last several years, and the offensive line is still horrible. So it's just, to me, it's a dysfunctional organization. And I think it starts with the ownership, who selects the guys, who then select the players, and come up with the sort of the game plans. So I don't really know what the fix for the Jets is. That's why I almost kind of feel like a Harbaugh or a Belichick would be the only people that come in and fix that mess. Because you need someone who knows how to actually run a system in an organization and would kind of take over the reins. I don't know how much the owner, Woody Johnson, sort of plays in terms of dictating what happens, but he sure hasn't been very good at selecting the coaches that, he's picked so far. So over the last decade, since Rex Ryan was the last time the Jets had any success. So,
that was a great summation of the Jets, history for the past 20 years or so. And you are a Jets fan. Why?
Well, I mean, that's just kind of a random
You'll
thing.
love this.
That's kind of a random thing, John. It's a random thing, but I don't necessarily pick teams based off of geographic location, just because I just like to have fun and I like to mix things up in life. So I became a Jets fan, though. This is super crazy, but became one because as a kid, my mom told me that the song by Elton John, Benny the Jets, was somehow connected to me and the Jets football. My favorite color is green. So it all made sense in the mind of, a 4-year-old at the time.
A Jets and Celtics fan.
I'll tell you that one next, Nick. Wait your turn.
Well, they're green.
One question at a time, but that is true. That's a good aspect of the Celtics, but that is not the reason, believe it or not.
And the Ducks have some green, or at least used to.
I can only go one person at a time, guys. You guys, hold on. So, the Jets, that was kind of thing. I was always, supportive of the Chiefs and supportive of the Ravens and stuff to a certain extent because of my dad. But, the Chiefs are kind of like my hometown team. But in terms of just kind of like a favorite team that you'd pick, the Jets. I guess kind of the cool thing that solidified me as a Jets fan, where I kind of felt vindicated for this kooky backstory, was when I went to Washington, D.C. to see the Jets play the Redskins. back in high school. And this was during the Rex Ryan years when the team was actually competitive and good and had just made back-to-back AFC championships. Anyway, so me being this random person from Kansas that somehow is a Jets fan, I go there before the game and I decide, you know what, I'm going to try to get autographs. That's something I do to Kansas City. And it's kind of a fun thing to do. Well, it turned out I went there, most successful autograph day of my entire life. I got 19 Jets players to sign autographs for me. And all of them were like giving me high fives and talking to me. The other Jets fans were acting as if I was like born and raised in the Bronx or something like that. You know, just I also became part of this gang almost. And yeah, I was like, wow, okay. So this whole Jets crazy story actually worked out well. So most successful autograph day of my life, and also the most generous and nice fan-friendly team I've ever come across. So it was really, really impressive. But yeah, in terms of the Celtics, I was a Ray Allen fan growing up. He bounced around a bit. There's no team in Kansas, so there's no obvious choice for me. And he ended up at the Celtics. The Celtics had Paul Pierce, former Kansas player. And as a kid, I met Bob Cousy, and I got Bob Cousy's autograph. And so I always had, that was like the only basketball memorabilia I ever had. So it just seemed like the perfect trifecta of things to make me a Celtics fan. Like, okay, this is too much going on here to not be a Celtics fan, since I never really had a strong interest in a particular team. So, and then they won the championship, and I was like, wow, okay, this is really working out well. Ducks, because of the movie, quack, quack, my Ducks, I think. Again, no NHL team in Kansas City. And when I was a kid, though, I sent the Anaheim Ducks a letter in the mail. And I was like, oh, I'm a Ducks fan or whatever. And they sent me a bunch of like free stuff. So that was kind of a vindication in that. But yeah, so those are the kind of the connections. Otherwise, it's like supporting Kansas City for MLS, then like the Orioles for baseball. But I support the Royals too. So, but
Do you remember how you became a Ray Allen fan?
I think for Ray Allen, it was just watching him. I don't know if there's any particular thing besides just watching his games.
So I remember this has actually happened at the house in Monroe.
What?
At Buck and Nana's house, we were hanging out like in the living room one night watching Sports Center or something, and they were showing highlights, and Ray Allen was like dominating. And I told you about who Ray Allen was. I'm like, oh, okay, he's cool. I like Ray Allen. I think that's kind of how it started.
Okay, so Bobby started the Ray Allen thing. There you go. I didn't even remember that story, but all I know is I guess it kind of makes sense because, when I do play basketball, I basically drain 3-pointers like Ray Allen did. So it kind of all adds up at the end of the day. That's why they called me like instant points whenever I used to play pickup basketball.
But before then, you had briefly decided to be a Christian Laettner fan.
Christian Laettner? What are you talking about?
Pistons. Yeah.
I thought you said like Vince Carter.
Maybe him too. You may have jumped around.
I remember Vince Carter. I don't remember anything about Christian Laettner though.
Yeah, it may have only lasted a day or two, but I do remember.
That might be a day or something.
I remember Benny and Vince Carter. Then Vince Carter kind of never brought you a title. So.
No. Well, I mean, I didn't really follow Vince. I think I may have followed him for a few years. Before that, I was like Michael Jordan with the Wizards. So, because I think the movie Space Jam had come out or something recently. And I was like, oh, Michael Jordan. And so, like, super old Michael Jordan out there with the Wizards put up 13 a game. So,
it's, by such means, our loyalties formed. Wow.
Yeah. Do you guys have who are your favorite like childhood sports figures? Maybe people that surprised you as an adult that you were supportive of or something?
I was a big Baltimore Orioles fan growing up. Back in the Brooks Robinson, remember Brooks Robinson, Dave McNally. I'd be out there in our driveway growing up with a tennis ball. I would pitch the tennis ball against the garage door, and then I would field it. I would know who I was pitching against. If it bounced funny off the garage door, that might be a base hit, and then I'd make the throw to, first base or whatever. I mean, I played an entire game by myself.
Yeah.
And, yeah, but I got the Orioles because that was who the family liked.
Yeah.
And now I look back at the fact that I followed what their preferences were, and I kind of question my wisdom a little bit, but that's okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of brainwashing going on back on 30th Avenue, Monroe. You know, I knew the whole Orioles, starting lineup, all their pitchers. I played that same tennis ball game against the driveway. Bam, bam, bam with catching the ball. So, yeah. Then with football, I knew all the Colts. If you ask me today, I mean, there's nowhere I can't name nearly that many players anymore on any team. But that was kind of the golden age in some respects of professional sports in my mind. That was a lot of fun. Over time, my mind went more to the college sports, and now I'm totally, wrapped up in the Badgers, which is cool. Fortunately, they're good enough that can maintain some interest there and a little bit of fun. Now, Bob, you were somewhat responsible, along with Dad, of kind of messing us up because we were kids.
I was just going
to say none of the neighbor kids rooted for the same teams we did.
No, that's certainly true. That's certainly true. Well, I mean, yeah, Dad got me squared away early, and because when we lived in Baltimore, we were literally a block from Memorial Stadium. So, at least as Dad would tell it when I was little, he and I'd walk, or he'd push me in a stroller, over to the stadium gates. We'd watch through the gates, Orioles or Colts, and anyway, he came out of there with strong feelings about it. Speaking of which, I guess one sort of in memoriam of Frank Ryan, quarterback of the Browns, who kind of ruined Christmas in 1964. When the Browns stunned the Colts in the NFL championship game, passed away the other day.
Right.
And as luck would have it, when I was at Yale doing part-time work in the athletic department, he was the athletic director. And so I can remember talking with him quite a few times. And I told him about Christmas '64. He apologized for ruining it.
Oh my God.
He was a real gentleman, smart guy.
Yeah.
And while he was AD, he was also a math professor. So,
wow,
multi-talented,
bright guy. I think Frank Ryan will help Jimmy Brown that day, but yeah, they were pretty dominant.
They had a heck of a game that day. It all came together. Yeah.
Yeah. No question about it. It's funny with sports. I was so tied to the Colts that when they left Baltimore in the early 80s, those Mayflower vans pulled up at midnight.
Yep.
I have never been an NFL fan the same way since.
Yeah.
I just can't truly buy in and love an NFL team. I don't know if just because the Colts are gone, or I just don't trust them, the NFL teams, or what it is. But yeah, it's who for me. But it was that changed my perspective on the NFL quite a bit.
Yeah, I'm scarred by that.
I can't imagine that happening. Like if the Chiefs left Kansas City, or if the Red Wings left Detroit, or any of my teams relocated, I don't know what I would do. That would be.
Because it's generally you're not mad at the players, but you're mad at the ownership.
Right.
You don't want to see the ownership go be successful someplace else.
Yeah.
Because they've walked out. They've walked out on all the people who supported the team over the years.
Yep. And
now there's probably some reasons to do that, by some political reasons, financial reasons. But boy, at the end of the day, it's like, man, can't you work it out?
Yeah, there was an argument over stadium improvements, but as we found out, of course, Bob Angelos was a pretty self-centered guy. But what also mattered was that, of course, they took the Colts brand with them.
Right.
When the Browns replaced the Colts and moved to Baltimore,
right,
the whole brand stayed in Cleveland. That's what
right.
That's what ought to have happened with Baltimore.
Right.
But they
should have left it behind.
Well,
it was the Earsays, the Colts.
Or
Yeah,
the
I mean-
Earsays, that's right.
Earsays, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
for
right.
the Orioles.
Freudian
I mean-
slip.
Yeah.
on the bright side, since I'm in Indianapolis and I've been to a few Colts games, they don't try to pretend that they're connected to the Baltimore Colts, even though they have the same name and imagery. Like, they don't have any of the Baltimore Colts banners in the stadium or anything like that. They talk about the team starting in like the 80s, 1983 or whatever, when they left. So they don't acknowledge the existence in Baltimore as part of the Indianapolis Colts franchise. Unlike, say, the Los Angeles Lakers that claim all the Minneapolis Laker titles, as if that was the same city, same team. So at least the Colts aren't doing that. And in fact, I think Johnny Unitas, though, made it pretty crystal clear that he'll never consider himself, connected to the Colts in terms of post Baltimore Colts. So
Yeah, most of the old Colts stayed close to Baltimore and kept the Indianapolis version at a distance. There were a few who made amends and later came to Indianapolis for a few ceremonial occasions, but by and large, the old Colts were doggedly loyal to Baltimore. So thanks to John for correcting me. That was, of course, Robert Irsay. Now I've got to apologize to the Angelos family for mentioning them and taking their name in vain.
Well,
Don't want the Orioles leaving
issues.
town.
They got their own issues.
Yeah, I love the Angelos
The
family.
Orioles
It's
owner is a bit of a piece of work.
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, it's been fun reminiscing down the road of sports here. We learned a lot about what everybody's thinking. Real quick, lightning round. What are the Vegas odds on Michigan and Washington? Like 5 points, or what is it?
Yeah,
I haven't seen any.
I saw
Okay.
Michigan -4.5.
All right. Lightning round. Who you going with? Considering with the points, who you taking? Michigan or Washington? Charlie, start with you.
Michigan.
Nick.
Washington.
Benny.
Michigan.
Bobby.
Washington straight up.
Bob.
I'll take Washington.
I'm going Michigan. I think Michigan's going to take them probably by 9, but it could be as low as 6. All right. So we will revisit those fantastic results here in a couple weeks. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll be back at you real soon. Thank you.